I was 10 minutes into my presentation to Helleton Group's executive team when the notification flashed across my tablet. Ivy Barrett, employment terminated, effective immediately. No warning, no explanation, just 8 months of work erased in 8 seconds. My heart dropped to my stomach, but my face never changed. The 10 C-suite executives seated around the polished conference table were watching me intently as I explained how my strategic framework would transform their customer service operations. They didn't see the notification. Only I did. I took a breath and continued speaking. They thought cutting me off mid-pitch would silence me. They were wrong. That night, Helleton's CEO called me directly, and that's when everything changed. My name is Ivy Barrett. I'm 34 years old, and until that morning, I was a senior strategic consultant at Venturovia Partners, a mid-sized business transformation and technology consulting firm that had been my professional home for nearly 5 years. This is the story of how I lost everything and then built something better from the ashes. The assignment of a lifetime. Ivy, I need you in my office, now. Marcus Donovan, Venturovia's CEO, rarely visited our floor, much less requested impromptu meetings. His voice carried that distinctive urgency that signaled opportunity or disaster, sometimes both. I quickly saved the market analysis I'd been working on and followed him to the executive suite. The company had been pursuing Helleton Group, a multinational logistics conglomerate with operations in 37 countries for years. They were the white whale of potential clients in our industry, known for their complexity and their budget. Landing them would put Venturovia in a new league. They want comprehensive customer service transformation, Marcus said, sliding a folder across his desk. End-to-end integration, advanced analytics, predictive modeling, training framework, the works, 60 million? Potentially more if we deliver. I want you to lead it. I felt my pulse quicken. Why me? The question escaped before I could filter it. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Because you're the best systems thinker we have. Because you designed the Alverson framework that won us Cooper Industries last year. Because you understand both the human element and the technology stack better than anyone else on the team. He paused. And because I trust you not to screw this up. I opened the folder. The preliminary scope document outlined Helleton's pain points. Fragmented customer touchpoints across global markets. Inconsistent service quality. Outdated metrics. High employee turnover. And skyrocketing costs. They needed someone to reimagine their entire customer experience ecosystem while maintaining operational continuity. When do I start? I asked. Yesterday, Marcus replied. You'll have access to whatever resources you need. This is a career maker, Ivy, for both of us. I nodded, already mentally assembling my team and approach. I didn't realize then that this opportunity would indeed remake my career, just not in the way either of us expected. The immersion. I spent the first month practically living at Helleton's headquarters. My days began at dawn with the logistics teams, and often ended past midnight analyzing data and interview transcripts. I shadowed customer service representatives, sat with analytics teams, observed warehouse operations, and interviewed executives. I needed to understand not just how their business functioned on paper, but how information and decisions flowed through the organization in practice. Has anyone ever actually done this before? Asked Ria Chen, Helleton's customer experience director, after finding me taking notes in their call center at 7:30 one morning. Done what? I asked, looking up from my observations. This total immersion thing. Most consultants we've worked with just want access to our data and a few executive interviews. I smiled. I'm not most consultants, and data only tells you what happened, not why. I need to understand the why. Over those first weeks, I built relationships across every level of Helleton's organization. I learned about the unofficial workarounds that kept their systems functioning despite outdated technology. I identified the informal leaders who influenced team performance regardless of title. I cataloged the disconnects between stated procedures and actual practices. By the end of the second month, I had compiled what my team called the Bible, a comprehensive analysis of Helleton's current state, complete with process maps, influence diagrams, pain point catalogs, and opportunity matrices. It was the foundation for everything that would follow. This is remarkable, said Jeffrey Hammond, Heliton's CEO, during my first formal presentation to their executive team. You've captured issues we've been trying to articulate for years. I felt a surge of pride. This is just the diagnostic phase. The real work is designing the solution. Over the next 6 months, I assembled and led a team of specialists to craft a transformation strategy that would redefine Heliton's customer service operations. We designed new workflows, selected technology platforms, developed training protocols, and created implementation roadmaps. Every component was meticulously crafted to integrate with their existing systems while enabling radical improvement. The strategy wasn't just about technology or processes, it was about people. We identified change champions within Heliton's organization, conducted pilot programs to demonstrate early wins, and built momentum for the larger transformation. I personally led workshops with key stakeholders to ensure buy-in and address concerns. By month 7, we had a comprehensive strategy that promised to reduce customer service costs by 32%, while improving satisfaction scores by at least 20%. The financial models projected a return on investment within 18 months. It was ambitious, but achievable, exactly what Heliton needed. This will reshape our entire operational future, Jeffrey told me after reviewing the final strategy document. I've never seen anything this comprehensive that still feels implementable. You've done remarkable work, Ivy. I should have been elated. Instead, I felt a vague unease. Success often attracts attention, not all of it welcome. The newcomer. Ivy, I'd like you to meet Felix Marsh. He's joining us as our new COO. Marcus made the introduction during our weekly leadership meeting. Felix was tall, impeccably dressed, with the practiced smile of someone who had mastered corporate politics. He had come from one of the Big Four consulting firms, ostensibly to help Venturovia scale as we pursued larger clients. I've heard wonderful things about your work with Heliton, Felix said, his handshake firm but somehow empty. I'm looking forward to learning more about your approach. Something in his tone made me wary, but I pushed the feeling aside. Happy to walk you through it any time. 2 days later, I received an email from Felix requesting all materials related to the Heliton engagement for alignment review. It wasn't an unusual request from new leadership, so I compiled a summary packet and sent it over. The following week, Felix scheduled a meeting with me. I've been reviewing your work, he began, and I have some concerns about the implementation timeline. What specifically concerns you? I asked. It's ambitious, perhaps overly so. He tapped his fingers on the conference table. I think we need to recalibrate expectations with the client. I shook my head. The timeline is aggressive but achievable. We've validated each milestone with the operational teams that will be responsible for delivery. Nevertheless, I'd like a complete copy of your implementation plan and all supporting documentation. I'll need to review it in detail before the next client meeting. I provided the requested materials, including my detailed implementation roadmap and resource allocation plan. It was the culmination of months of work, a comprehensive blueprint for transforming Heliton's customer service operations. 3 days later, I received a calendar invitation for a Heliton strategy review with the executive team. Felix was listed as the presenter. My name was nowhere on the agenda. I called Marcus immediately. It's just a formality, he assured me. Felix needs to get up to speed on our major accounts. You'll still lead the implementation. When I arrived at the meeting, Felix was already setting up his presentation. As the slides appeared on screen, I felt my blood pressure rise. They were my slides with my name removed, and Felix's added. The implementation plan I had created was now being presented as the Marsh Method for Transformational Execution. I sat silently through the presentation, watching as Felix took credit for my work. When questions arose about specific technical aspects of the implementation, he deflected. Ivy can address the tactical details. My focus has been on the strategic framework. After the meeting, I approached Marcus. Did you see what just happened? He avoided my eyes. Felix is taking a more active role in client management. It's good for the firm to have his experience visible to clients of Heliton's caliber. But he presented my work as his own. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. Ivy, you're still a critical part of this project, but as we pursue larger clients, we need to present a certain image. Felix has the background these clients expect. What he meant but wouldn't say, was that Felix looked the part. He was male, conventionally attractive, with an Ivy League pedigree and the right connections. I was a woman who had worked her way up through results rather than relationships. That night, I created a new folder on my personal drive. I named it Ardessa, after my grandmother who had taught me that preparation was the key to survival. At first, I used it simply to store original versions of my work, along with emails documenting my contributions. It was insurance, nothing more. I didn't know then that it would become the foundation of my future. The systematic exclusion. The changes were subtle at first. I noticed I was no longer copied on certain email threads about the Hellaton project. When I asked about it, I was told it was an administrative oversight. Then my access to shared project folders was accidentally restricted, requiring me to request specific documents rather than having full visibility. During client meetings, Felix began positioning himself between me and Hellaton's executives physically and metaphorically. He would intercept questions meant for me or reframe my answers to claim ownership of the insights. As I was explaining to Jeffrey last week, he would say, referring to conversations I had initiated but was now excluded from, when implementation planning began, Felix brought in Nora Chen, a recent MBA graduate who had interned with us the previous summer. I had mentored Nora during her internship and found her bright but inexperienced. Nora will be supporting the implementation phase, Felix announced. Ivy, I need you to transfer your knowledge to her as quickly as possible. Transfer my knowledge, I repeated, disbelieving. Felix, this is a $60 million transformation. It requires experience to implement, not just technical knowledge. Nora has a fresh perspective, he replied smoothly, and I'll be overseeing the strategic elements. I was being sidelined gradually but systematically. The project I had conceived, designed, and sold was being taken from me piece by piece. A week later, I received a calendar invitation from Human Resources for a resource allocation review. When I arrived, I found Diane Keller, our HR director, and Felix waiting for me. Ivy, as part of our organizational restructuring, we're realigning responsibilities to optimize client delivery, Diane began, reading from what was clearly a prepared statement. What restructuring? I asked. This was the first I'd heard of any reorganization. It's a strategic initiative to better leverage our senior talent, Felix interjected. We need your expertise on internal methodology development rather than client-facing work. Translation. They were pulling me from client projects to work on internal documentation, a sideline role with no visibility or advancement potential. Is this about Hellaton? I asked directly. This is about the firm's broader needs, Diane replied, not meeting my eyes. I left that meeting knowing my days at Venturovia were numbered. They wanted my knowledge but not my presence. They wanted to claim my work but remove me from the equation. That evening, I updated my resume for the first time in 5 years, but as I reviewed my accomplishments, a different idea began to form. If Venturovia no longer valued what I brought to the table, perhaps it was time to bring my value elsewhere on my terms. Hack the contingency plan. I spent the next 2 weeks carefully reviewing my employment contract and non-compete agreements. The terms restricted me from soliciting Venturovia's clients directly for 1 year after leaving the firm. However, there was no prohibition against clients approaching me, a subtle but crucial distinction. I also assessed what intellectual property I could legally take with me. The specific solutions designed for Hellaton belonged to Venturovia, but the methodologies and frameworks I had developed were mine. I had created them before joining the firm and had documentation to prove it. Working evenings and weekends, I began building what I called my emergency kit, a collection of frameworks, templates, and methodologies that I could use to quickly establish a new consulting practice if necessary. I was careful to include only materials that wouldn't violate any confidentiality agreements. Next, I reached out to 2 former colleagues who had left Venturovia the previous year, Eliza Washington, a brilliant implementation specialist, and Miguel Reyes, an attorney who had transitioned from legal counsel to consulting. I invited them to dinner at my apartment, away from corporate eyes and ears. I'm not saying I'm leaving, I told them after explaining my situation. But if I did, would you be interested in joining forces? Eliza leaned forward. Are you thinking of starting your own firm? I'm thinking of having options, I replied. Right now, I'm being systematically pushed out of a project I created. I want to be prepared for whatever happens next. Miguel nodded thoughtfully. Smart. What would this hypothetical firm focus on? Implementation strategy. It's the gap in the market that none of the big firms address well. They sell grand visions but stumble on execution. We'd position ourselves as the specialists who ensure transformations actually succeed. We spent the evening outlining what this potential firm might look like. We sketched organizational structures, service offerings, and go-to-market strategies. By midnight, we had the skeleton of a business plan. We need a name, Eliza said, refilling her wine glass. Ardessa, I replied without hesitation. It means burning with passion in Italian. Ardessa Strategies, Miguel tested the words. It has a good ring to it. Over the next month, while continuing to fulfill my increasingly marginalized role at Venturovia, I worked with Miguel and Eliza to establish the infrastructure for Ardessa. We registered the business, created a bare-bones website, set up accounting systems, and drafted service agreements. Everything was in place but dormant, ready to activate if needed. I wasn't planning to leave Venturovia immediately. I wanted to see the Hellaton project through, to ensure that my vision for their transformation would be properly implemented despite Felix's interference, but I needed to be prepared for all possibilities. As it turned out, I didn't have to make the decision. Venturovia made it for me. The moment of truth. The final presentation to Hellaton's executive team was scheduled for a Thursday morning. It was the culmination of 8 months of work, the formal unveiling of the complete transformation strategy before implementation would begin. Although Felix had increasingly positioned himself as the face of the project, I was still listed as the lead presenter for this critical meeting. I arrived at Hellaton's headquarters an hour early to ensure everything was prepared. The conference room was impeccable, with fresh coffee and pastries arranged on the sideboard. I connected my tablet to the presentation system and reviewed my slides one last time. At 8:45, Hellaton's executives began arriving. Jeffrey Hammond, their CEO, Tessa Granger, their COO, and 8 other senior leaders who would be critical to the transformation's success. They greeted me warmly, having worked closely with me throughout the project's development. At 8:55, Felix arrived with Nora in tow. He seemed surprised to see me already set up. I'll handle the strategic overview, he said quietly. You can cover the implementation details in the second half. I nodded, having expected this attempt to minimize my role. It didn't matter. The work spoke for itself, and I knew every aspect of it intimately. At 9:00 sharp, Jeffrey called the meeting to order. We're here today to review the final transformation strategy that Ivy and her team have developed over the past 8 months, he began. Ivy, the floor is yours. Felix shifted uncomfortably but didn't object as I took my position at the head of the table. Thank you. Jeffrey, I began. What we're presenting today isn't just a technology upgrade or a process redesign. It's a fundamental reimagining of how Hellaton connects with its customers across every touchpoint. I launched into the presentation, walking them through the comprehensive strategy we had developed. I explained how the new customer service architecture would integrate with their existing systems while enabling new capabilities. I showed the financial models demonstrating the projected return on investment. I outlined the implementation roadmap that would minimize disruption while accelerating benefits. 10 minutes in, as I was explaining a particularly innovative aspect of the solution, my tablet screen flashed. A notification appeared in the center. Ivy Barrett, employment terminated, effective immediately. Beneath it, a second message, access to Venturovia systems revoked. My heart hammered in my chest, but I didn't miss a beat. Years of presenting under pressure had taught me to maintain composure regardless of circumstances. I continued speaking, gesturing to the diagram currently displayed on the main screen. This integration framework allows for real-time data synchronization between customer-facing channels and back-office operations, I explained, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my system. From the corner of my eye, I could see Felix typing frantically on his phone. He had obviously not expected this timing. Someone in HR had pulled the trigger prematurely, not realizing I was in the middle of the client presentation. I continued through the entire presentation without acknowledging the notification. For 45 minutes, I detailed the transformation strategy, answered questions, and addressed concerns, all while officially no longer employed by Venturovia. When I concluded, Jeffrey stood and shook my hand. Exceptional work. Ivy, this is exactly what we've been looking for. Thank you, I replied. I believe this strategy will transform Hellaton's customer experience for years to come. Felix quickly stepped forward. We're excited to begin implementation. Nora will be your day-to-day contact moving forward, with me providing executive oversight. Jeffrey looked surprised. Ivy won't be leading the implementation. Before Felix could respond, I spoke. I should let Felix address that question. I need to step out briefly. I gathered my personal belongings, leaving the tablet on the table, and walked out of the conference room with my head held high. I didn't look back at Felix. I didn't need to. I had done my job with excellence until the very end. As I left Hellaton's building, I felt a strange mixture of anger and liberation. 8 months of work had culminated in this moment of professional betrayal, yet I had refused to let it diminish me. I had delivered my best work despite knowing what was happening behind the scenes. I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air and made a call. Miguel, it's time to activate Ardessa. The unexpected call. I spent the rest of the day in practical matters. I updated my LinkedIn profile, notified key professional contacts of my change in status, and formally activated Ardessa's business registration. Miguel and Eliza both confirmed they were ready to move forward as planned. By evening, I was physically and emotionally exhausted. I ordered takeout, poured a glass of wine, and was just settling onto my couch when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello, this is Ivy Barrett? Ivy, it's Tessa Granger from Hellaton. The voice of Hellaton's COO was unmistakable. I sat up straighter. Tessa, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. There was a pause. Something strange happened after you left today. Felix tried to continue the meeting, but he couldn't answer basic questions about the implementation approach. When Jeffrey pressed him on certain details, he deferred to Nora, who also couldn't provide clear answers. I remained silent, letting her continue. Then Jeffrey asked directly why you wouldn't be leading the implementation. Felix said you had chosen to pursue other opportunities, but the way he said it felt off. Another pause. So I called a colleague at Cooper Industries who worked with Venturovia last year. She told me you were the architect of their transformation as well, and that you left the meeting today because you were terminated. I took a slow breath. That's correct. Were you fired because of something related to our project? I can't speak to Venturovia's internal decisions, I replied carefully. What I can tell you is that I stand behind every aspect of the transformation strategy I presented today. It's solid, implementable, and will deliver the results we projected. But you won't be implementing it. Not as a Venturovia employee, no. Tessa was quiet for a moment. Ivy, I'm going to ask you something directly, and I'd appreciate a direct answer. Do you believe Venturovia can successfully implement this transformation without you? It was the question I had been dreading, the one that placed me at the intersection of professional ethics and personal integrity. I chose my words with extreme care. The strategy is sound, the roadmap is detailed. With the right leadership and expertise, it can be implemented successfully. I paused. Whether Venturovia currently has that leadership and expertise is not for me to judge. I see. Tessa's tone suggested she understood exactly what I wasn't saying. And what are your plans now? I've established a strategic implementation consultancy called Ardessa Strategies. We focus specifically on ensuring complex transformations deliver on their promised value. Interesting timing. I smiled despite myself. I believe in being prepared, Tessa. So do I. She paused again. Would your new firm be in a position to implement the strategy you designed for Hellaton? My heart skipped a beat, but I maintained my professional demeanor. Ardessa could absolutely implement the strategic framework. We have the expertise and the methodology. However, I should note that I have non-solicitation provisions in my former employment agreement. You're not soliciting us, Tessa replied. I'm calling you. That's an important distinction. I thought it might be. I could hear the smile in her voice. Jeffrey and I would like to meet with you tomorrow, not at Venturovia's offices, obviously. Could you come to my home at 10? I'll text you the address. I'll be there, I promised. After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Then I called Miguel and Eliza. We had preparations to make before tomorrow's meeting. The pivot. Tessa's home was a modernist masterpiece overlooking the city, all clean lines, open spaces, and strategic splashes of color. She greeted me at the door in casual weekend attire, a marked contrast to her usual corporate armor. "Ivy, come in. Jeffrey's already here." She led me to a sunlit living room where Jeffrey Hammond was examining a large abstract painting. He turned as we entered, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Quite a situation we find ourselves in," he said, offering his hand. "Indeed," I replied, shaking it firmly. "I'll be direct," Jeffrey continued once we were seated. "We've invested 8 months in developing this transformation strategy. We believe in the approach you've designed. What we don't believe in is Ventorovia's ability to execute it without you." "Felix Marsh called me last night," Tessa added. "He spent 45 minutes trying to convince me that your departure was planned and that Nora is fully prepared to lead implementation. When I asked technical questions about the integration architecture, he couldn't answer them." Jeffrey leaned forward. "Here's our situation. We're ready to move forward with this transformation. We can't afford to delay, but we need confidence in the implementation team." "What are you proposing?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "We want to explore working with Ardessa instead of Venturovia," Tessa stated plainly. I nodded slowly. "That's possible, but there are considerations. First, while Ardessa has the expertise to implement the strategy, we're a new firm without Venturovia's resources. Second, there may be legal complications regarding the intellectual property of the strategy itself." "We've thought of both issues," Jeffrey replied. "Regarding the first, we don't need Venturovia's bench strength. We need the right expertise leading our people through this change. As for the second," he glanced at Tessa. She took over. "Our legal team reviewed our contract with Venturovia this morning. The strategy deliverables are owned by Hellaton once paid for, which they have been. The implementation was a separate statement of work that hasn't been formally engaged yet. So legally, we can take the strategy we paid for and engage anyone we choose for implementation," Jeffrey concluded. I considered this carefully. It was technically correct, but I knew Felix and Marcus wouldn't see it that way. They would view any engagement with Hellaton as a violation of my non-compete, regardless of who initiated contact. "If we were to move forward," I said, "I would need certain protections. Venturovia will likely claim I violated my employment agreements, even though I didn't solicit this opportunity." "We anticipated that," Tessa replied. She retrieved a folder from the side table and handed it to me. "Our legal department drafted this. It's a statement confirming that Hellaton approached Ardessa, not the reverse, along with an indemnification clause protecting you from any legal costs arising from Venturovia's potential claims." I scanned the document. It was comprehensive and clearly drafted by attorneys who understood the nuances of employment law. It wouldn't prevent Venturovia from filing a lawsuit, but it would provide a strong defense and financial protection. "This is helpful," I acknowledged, "but I need to be transparent about Ardessa's current state. We're a team of 3 at present: myself, an implementation specialist, and an attorney with consulting experience. We were preparing to scale gradually, not take on a $60 million project immediately." Jeffrey smiled. "That's actually perfect. We don't need a large team from your end. We need leadership, expertise, and methodology. Our people will do the heavy lifting with your guidance." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Tessa outlined their vision. Ardessa would provide strategic oversight and specialized expertise for the transformation. We would work directly with Hellaton's internal teams, rather than bringing in a large external workforce. The implementation would be phased over 18 months, with clear milestones and accountability mechanisms. The contract value would be $35 million, she concluded. Less than Venturovia's proposal, but with a higher margin for your firm since you wouldn't be staffing the entire project. My mind raced with possibilities and potential pitfalls. This was an extraordinary opportunity, the kind that could establish Ardessa as a serious player immediately rather than after years of gradual growth. But it was also fraught with risk. Venturovia would be furious. They might do more than sue. They might actively try to undermine our success. "I need 24 hours to consult with my partners," I said finally. and I'd want to bring them to our next discussion if we move forward. Of course, Jeffrey agreed. We'll need a few days ourselves to prepare for a potential transition. Let's reconnect on Tuesday morning. I nodded. Tuesday works. As I left Tessa's home, I felt oddly calm despite the magnitude of what had just been proposed. Perhaps it was because, after months of having control gradually taken from me, I was finally back in a position to shape my own destiny. The counterattack. I barely slept that weekend. Working with Miguel and Eliza to prepare for Tuesday's meeting, we developed a detailed implementation approach, created staffing plans, and outlined risk mitigation strategies. By Sunday evening, we were confident in our ability to deliver what Hellaton needed. Monday morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus Donovan. "You have a lot of nerve," he began without preamble, his voice tight with anger. "Good morning to you too, Marcus," I replied calmly. "Don't play games. Ivy, Jeffrey Hammond just informed me that Hellaton is considering terminating their relationship with Venturovia and engaging your, what did he call it? Ardessa strategies." "That's correct. This is a clear violation of your non-compete. You're soliciting our client directly after having access to proprietary information." "I didn't solicit anyone," I countered. "Tessa Granger called me after your COO couldn't answer basic questions about the strategy I designed. And as for proprietary information, the transformation strategy belongs to Hellaton. They paid for it." "We'll see what the courts have to say about that," Marcus snapped. "We're filing for an injunction today. I suggest you call Jeffrey and tell him you've reconsidered, or you'll be buried in legal fees for the next year." I had anticipated this reaction, but the reality of it still sent a chill through me. "Before you file anything, Marcus, I suggest you review Section 7.3 of my employment agreement. The non-compete specifically prevents me from soliciting clients. It doesn't prevent clients from approaching me after termination." "Semantics," he dismissed. "No judge will buy that distinction when you're trying to steal a $60 million account. First, it's not a $60 million account anymore. Hellaton has revised the implementation approach. Second, I didn't steal anything. You fired me in the middle of a client presentation without warning. What did you expect to happen?" "That was an unfortunate timing error," Marcus admitted, his tone softening slightly. "HR was supposed to process your termination after the presentation concluded." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, that makes it so much better. You were planning to let me deliver the final pitch and then fire me on my way out the door." "Business decisions aren't personal, Ivy." "Neither is this," I replied. "Hellaton wants the expertise that designed their transformation strategy to implement it. That expertise now resides at Ardessa. It's a straightforward business decision." There was a long pause. "What would it take to bring you back?" Marcus finally asked. "We could offer a partnership track, equity compensation." The question caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, he thought I might return. "It's too late for that, Marcus. You chose Felix over me. You allowed him to systematically push me out of a project I created. You terminated me without warning or explanation. There's no going back from that." "Don't do this, Ivy," he warned, his voice hardening again. "You're making a powerful enemy." "No, Marcus. I'm making a future for myself based on my own value, not what others decide I'm worth." I paused. "I wish you and Venturovia the best, but Ardessa is moving forward." I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, but my resolve was stronger than ever. There was no turning back now. The launch. Tuesday's meeting with Hellaton went exactly as planned. Jeffrey and Tessa were impressed with our implementation approach and the clear roles we had defined for their internal teams. By Friday, we had signed the contract $35 million over 18 months, with clear deliverables and performance metrics. The news spread quickly through the industry. A newly formed consultancy winning a contract of this size from a multinational corporation was unprecedented. Speculation ran rampant about how we had secured the deal. As expected, Venturovia filed for an injunction to prevent us from working with Hellaton, but thanks to Miguel's legal expertise and the careful documentation we had maintained, the judge denied their request. The non-solicitation provision in my employment agreement clearly specified that I couldn't approach Venturovia's clients. It said nothing about clients approaching me after my termination. With the legal hurdle cleared, we focused on delivery. We established a project office at Hellaton's headquarters and began the careful work of implementing the transformation strategy. We hired selectively, bringing on only the specialized talent we needed rather than building a large staff. 2 months into the implementation, we received an unexpected visitor. Nora Chen, the junior consultant Felix had positioned as my replacement, asked to meet for coffee. "I resigned from Venturovia yesterday," she told me, her expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Everything's falling apart there." "What do you mean?" I asked. After Hellaton terminated the contract, Felix tried to salvage the relationship, but he couldn't explain how the implementation would work. Then 2 other clients, Cooper Industries and Neurotech, started asking questions about who had actually designed their solutions. I raised an eyebrow, and Felix couldn't answer their technical questions either. Nora fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Last week, Cooper announced they're evaluating alternative partners for their Phase 2 expansion. Rumor has it they've reached out to Ardessa." I neither confirmed nor denied this, though it was true. Cooper's CIO had called me the previous month, curious about our new venture. "The thing is," Nora continued, "I joined Venturovia to learn from people like you, not to be used as a pawn in corporate politics. I was hoping—" She hesitated. "I was hoping you might consider me for a position at Ardessa." I studied her carefully. Nora was bright and eager, with potential that had been ill-served by Venturovia's environment. She had been as much a victim of Felix's manipulations as I had been. "We have rigorous standards," I told her, "and we're building something different from Venturovia, a firm where expertise and integrity matter more than politics." "That's exactly what I want," she said earnestly. I nodded. "Send your resume to Eliza. We'll set up a formal interview next week." Nora joined Ardessa a month later, the first of several talented consultants we recruited from Venturovia as the firm's reputation continued to decline. Without the Hellaton account and with other major clients questioning their relationships, Venturovia's position weakened. By the 6-month mark, they had initiated layoffs. By 9 months, their board had removed Marcus as CEO. Felix Marsh lasted slightly longer, but his inability to deliver on the promises he had made eventually caught up with him. When Cooper Industries formally engaged Ardessa for their second phase transformation, Felix was also shown the door. I took no pleasure in Venturovia's struggles. The firm had been my professional home for years, and many good people worked there, but I recognized that what was happening was the natural consequence of prioritizing politics over performance, appearance over substance. Meanwhile, Ardessa thrived. The Hellaton implementation progressed ahead of schedule, delivering the promised benefits and establishing our reputation for excellence. Other clients followed, first Cooper, then Neurotech, then new opportunities that came through referrals and industry recognition. We grew deliberately, adding capability only when we identified specific needs. By our first anniversary, we had expanded to 42 professionals, all specialists with deep expertise in their domains. We maintained a lean operating model, with minimal hierarchy and maximum client impact. The new beginning. Exactly 1 year after my termination from Venturovia, I stood outside Ardessa's new headquarters. The 6-story building in the heart of the business district represented more than just office space. It was tangible proof of what we had built from adversity. I remembered the tablet notification that had flashed during my final presentation: Ivy Barrett, employment terminated, effective immediately. At the time, it had seemed like the end of something. In reality, it had been the beginning. As I swiped my access card and entered the lobby, I reflected on the journey. We had faced challenges. Certainly, the legal battle with Venturovia had dragged on for months before they finally conceded defeat. Building a company while simultaneously delivering a complex transformation for Hellaton had meant 18-hour days and constant pressure. There had been moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion. But there had also been moments of extraordinary satisfaction. Seeing our implementation succeed where Venturovia's approach would have failed, watching our team grow and develop, creating a company culture based on respect, expertise, and results rather than politics and positioning. I took the elevator to the top floor, where our leadership team was gathered for a strategic planning session. Eliza, Miguel, and the other partners we had brought on were waiting, along with Nora, who had quickly proven her value and earned a role as our transformation methodology lead. "Good morning, everyone," I began, taking my place at the head of the table. "Today marks 1 year since Ardessa began. I'd like to start by thanking each of you for your commitment to building something truly different in our industry." I looked around the room at these brilliant, dedicated professionals who had chosen to join our venture. Some had left secure positions at established firms. Others had taken a chance on a startup in an industry dominated by giants. All had contributed to our remarkable success. When I founded Ardessa, it was born from necessity, not ambition. I continued. I needed a vehicle to deliver value on my own terms after having that opportunity taken away. But what we've built together has become something much more significant, a firm that's changing how our industry thinks about transformation implementation. We spent the day refining our 3-year strategy, identifying growth opportunities, and discussing how to maintain our culture as we expanded. The energy in the room was palpable, a blend of pride in what we had accomplished and excitement about what lay ahead. As the session concluded, I found myself standing by the windows, looking out at the city below. Nora joined me, holding 2 glasses of champagne from the celebration that had spontaneously erupted as our meeting ended. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, handing me one of the glasses. I smiled. I was just thinking about that day at Hellaton. If they hadn't fired me mid-presentation, none of this would exist. "Do you ever regret what happened?" I considered the question carefully. I regret that it had to happen that way. I regret that an organization I respected chose politics over performance, but I don't regret where it led. Nora nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I heard Felix has been struggling to find a new position. Apparently, the Venturovia situation has followed him." "That's unfortunate," I said, and meant it. "But ultimately, we all have to stand on our actual value, not on what we claim or take credit for." "That's what I admire most about Ardessa," Nora replied. "Here, your value is in what you contribute, not how well you play the game." I raised my glass slightly, to building on value rather than politics. She clinked her glass against mine. "To Ardessa." As the celebration continued around us, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led to something genuine and valuable, a company that embodied my beliefs about how business should be conducted. They had tried to silence me by cutting me off mid-presentation. Instead, they had freed me to create something better. They had attempted to erase my contributions, but in doing so, they had catalyzed my greatest achievement. Ivy Barrett, terminated effective immediately and immediately unleashed to transform not just a client, but an industry. Sometimes the end is just the beginning. Sometimes being cut off is exactly what you need to find your voice. And sometimes, the most powerful response to rejection is not a fight, but a creation. Ardessa was that creation, a living testament to the principle that true value can't be terminated with the press of a button or the stroke of a pen. It resides in expertise, integrity, and the courage to stand for both, even when standing alone. Or as it turned out, not alone at all, but surrounded by others who recognized and shared those values, ready to build something meaningful together. That's the real power they had never understood. They thought they were ending something. They were actually setting it free.